talked a lot about this morning and over the past couple of days, a lot about different applications of Earth observation in impact evaluations. We've looked at different tools and methodologies, as well as some specific cases from different partners. Now we're going to turn our attention to something a little different. How do we see these methods and tools being applied in different geographical contexts? So the session that's happening now and in parallel with South Asia seeks to tackle some of these larger questions. So what do we see are some of the opportunities, challenges, and frontiers in being able to apply these methods, these data in Africa in particular. So I have assembled with me a distinguished panel to discuss some of these questions today. And just for context, I will go ahead and read you their bios and do a brief round of introductions. I have a set of prepared questions that the panel will help answer. And hopefully we will have an engaging discussion here. And as time allows, we would also like to include you in the audience. So be thinking about questions that you might like to ask in this particular context. We'll save some of those questions for the end. So I will go ahead and get started. So joining me today is Dr. Foster Mensah. And Foster is the Executive Director of the Center for Remote Sensing and Geographic Information Services, based at the University of Ghana in Accra. His expertise spans satellite, remote sensing, spatial modeling, disaster risk management, climate resilience, and natural resource governance. He has contributed to projects on mining-related environmental change and geospatial decision support systems across West Africa, including ASGM formalization through integrated land use planning. He holds a bachelor's degree in geodetic engineering and a PhD in geography and resource development. I'm also joined by Iriana Razafimahenina, and she is working on a PhD on in a program that's between the University of Paris and the University of Antananarivo. Perfect. In Madagascar. Sorry. Her doctoral research is part of the BETS-AKA project, funded by KfW, also AFD, and the French National Research Institute for Sustainable Development. Her research focuses on evaluating the socioeconomic impacts of protected areas in Madagascar. Thank you for joining us. I'm also joined by Dr. Arinze Nwokolo, and he is an assistant professor at the Department of Accounting, Economics, and Finance at Lagos Business School, Pan Atlantic University. He has a PhD in economics from the University of Navarra, Spain, and his research comprises topics relevant to developing countries and includes topics in development economics, corporate finance, political economy, and organizational economics. His recent projects include gas flaring, agricultural productivity and labor reallocation, vocational training plus programs for vulnerable women in Nigeria, and the impact of mental health therapy on business performance of female entrepreneurs. In his research, he also studies how the natural, social environment and public policy influence individual, household, and firm behaviors. In the past, he predominantly used secondary data as well as natural and quasi-experiments. And currently, he uses field experiments. And prior to joining the Lagos Business School, he was a case fellow at Oxford University and a research associate at the Navarra Institute International Development Center in Spain. And lastly, I'm joined by Dr. Peter Njiforti, and he is a professor of economics. He holds a PhD in agricultural economics, a master's in agricultural economics, and a bachelor's in economics from Ahmadu Bello University. And he currently teaches research methodology, mathematical economics, and advanced econometrics at the business school there. He has widely published in both local and international peer-reviewed journals, and his research interests are in the areas of agricultural, environmental, and development economics. He has been involved in a wide range of empirical research studies and was the Faculty of Social Sciences representatives on the Ahmadu Bello University Board of Research. So as you can see, I'm joined by a distinguished panel here today as we talk about Earth observation, geospatial impact evaluations, and their role within the African continent. So to help us set the stage, our first question is, where do panelists see the greatest opportunities for geospatial impact evaluation in the region? And I'm going to turn this to Foster and to Arinze.
Yes, so thank you very much for I must say that the African continent is we face a lot of development challenges, which I know there's been a lot of interventions which have to be monitored along the way. Remote sensing, what remote sensing, I must say, provides is a great monitoring tool, and in a region like this where traditional methods of monitoring can be very expensive, and I think that remote sensing provides a platform that makes it very cost effective. So in that regard, remote sensing comes in to complement what impact evaluation practitioners have been doing. And so obviously in Africa, we have also issues with food security and and agricultural development systems. And that is where I know that impact evaluation has been very, very successful. And so obviously, using remote sensing products to complement that monitoring effort in that space, I see a lot of opportunities there. Not only that, but the emerging natural resource governance space also, like mining. I think that deforestation and the relationship between mining, commodity crop production, I think there's also a lot of opportunities there. And even in disaster risk management, I think there's also a lot of opportunities there. What is interesting is that now we have a lot of data, especially from the remote sensing platforms that have been launched, various resolutions. You can get Sentinel from Landsat, Sentinel. You don't even have to talk about MODIS, even though the temporal resolution of MODIS is useful for that purpose. So I see a range of and great opportunities for Africa filling in that gap, so we can leapfrog, especially when it comes to monitoring these interventions and make evidence available for decision making. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. So, having been in this conference, one of the things I've seen a lot is agriculture, focus on agriculture, focus on mining, focus on pollution, conflict. Now, discussing with some government officials, one of the things they keep on hampering on is jobs. How can you provide more jobs? How can you do like women empowerment? Now, it will be interesting, actually, if we could get satellite data that shows us where the clusters you have a lot of women working, for instance, in the trading sector or in manufacturing. Which kind of implementations or interventions can you do in those clusters that could help those women actually, you could say, create more jobs? Okay, so I think that's an area that remote sensing can go towards. How can you create more jobs? But looking at where the jobs are created using remote sensing data. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think, you both have highlighted that there's great opportunity for the use of Earth observation data in a variety of different contexts. I'd like to dig a little deeper on that. And maybe, Peter, could you help us unpack which sectors you think are ready for kind of the broad adoption of geospatial impact evaluation approaches? If you have any examples that you might want to share to help shed some light on that.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I would like to share my thoughts in an area that we've had practical field experience, and in an area that I have had direct practical experience working across Nigeria and part of West Africa, more especially in agriculture, geospatial data collections, and impact, verification. So from the field experience we've had, the key sector, there are a good number of them that I'm going to discuss. One of the very key sector is the agricultural sector, more especially small scale agriculture, where the need for verification is already very high. So I will go straight to look at the sectorial priorities. As I said, agriculture is one of the key areas, more especially small-scale agriculture, because there's already a high need for verification of this particular sector. Now, from what we've seen in the field, agriculture, especially smallholder agriculture, is the most immediate viable sector that needs, geospatial impact evaluation. Not because it is the simplest, but because the need for verification is already very high. So in one of our recent projects, which is linked to agricultural insurance, we work closely with the enumerators to capture GPS-enabled photo data of farm plots. Now, the experience we drew from that was that the traditional data, the traditional survey methods, whereby farmers estimate their farm sizes and report production, are highly unreliable. So, but when the geospatial tools are introduced, then we begin to see some level of reliability. Now, again, the lesson we learned from that fieldwork is that our enumerators collected geo points of farm plot many times, at times 4 times, at times 6 times. And so we again realized that farmers that have fragmented plots, fragmented smaller plot, the enumerators took the geo points of this plot independently then and aggregate them. Now, what do we take away from this? What we notice is that the structure of farm plots in Africa is highly fragmented and scattered and not reflected in the conventional database. So that was actually what we noticed. So for agriculture, the readiness comes from 3 key things. Number 1, clear spatial units. 2, strong demand for accountability. And 3, immediate use cases like insurance, subsidy, and productivity targeting. So these were the key things. So the other sector I would like to equally throw light on is climate adaptations and land restoration. Now, geospatial tools or satellite imagery actually play a great role in this, or has been used widely in this area, because used widely in the sense that we notice that here, especially time series vegetative indices, the satellite imagery has been able to help to do quite some work, which I will explain. For instance, in northern Nigeria, we have seen cases where reported land restoration does not align with what the satellite imagery, shows. Now, this means that the use of the satellite imagery is gradually moving us away from reported outcomes to observed outcomes with respect to that. Then the next thing which I equally want to highlight, the third sector, is rural infrastructure and service delivery. Things like electrifications, water points, and rural routes are highly inherently spatial in nature, but they are highly not represented. And so we have seen administrative data suggests full coverage, but when you overlay spatial data, you see that there are visible gaps. So these are some of the sectors. So in summary, the sectors that are most ready and those where there is already tensions around measurement and accountability. So therefore, the geospatial tools strive very well in these sectors.
Thank you for highlighting some of those examples and some of the instances in which you've seen where this data might be useful and these tools would be useful as well. Foster, you kind of started to mention a few of the sectors in your opening remarks that would be useful and ready for these tools. Could you elaborate a little bit more on where you see these methods being useful?
Yes, especially in the agriculture. I think I've seen a lot of examples because of this engagement with economists, and they want to integrate remote sensing indices in monitoring landscapes. For instance, if you want to probably measure production, you would want to know how well the vegetation or the crop is doing, and remote sensing allows you the ability, the images allow you the ability to estimate or measure this with indices that can be derived from these products. I've also worked with a couple of colleagues on rainwater harvesting and how we can use the remote sensing products to look at the landscape and the regeneration of smallholder farmer managed regeneration of smallholder crops. I think the field is very broad. I am beginning to also see that, and from yesterday's, was it this morning or yesterday's presentation where a colleague, one of the colleagues also used it for disaster risk management. So these are the examples that I think that remote sensing can help complement the efforts that impact evaluation practitioners.
I can add to that. So some of the things I've seen recently, especially with the central banks, is that they're interested in climate finance. They would like to know how are households affected by climate shocks, and how does it impact their loan repayments or defaults or their credit rating. So that's an area that is ripe, right, for using remote sensing data to see how do households even build resilience, right, to climate shocks in terms of climate finance. The other sector is the telecom sector, right? So a couple of papers have kind of talked about how farmers use mobile networks in order actually to see whether they're exposed to the market price shocks or not. That's also another area that remote sensing could help. And the third one is trading networks matter, right? So there's this company in Nigeria called Trade Depot. One of the things they have done is using data to map like side shop women, sellers, traders. And by mapping them, they are also able to observe their inventory, to know when their inventory is going down and when they can supply. And that actually changed a lot of things for these women and actually helped them improve their livelihood. And this is an area that I think that working with companies like this and then mapping it with satellite data can actually help you see a lot of what is happening at the local level, right, of the country. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think through that discussion we've just had, there are some sectors that seem obviously ripe for these types of methods. I think we've talked about agriculture, and then ways in which we can extend these methods into different types of sectors that have to date not been utilized as much in. And so I appreciate that discussion as we think about moving forward from, knowing that maybe agriculture is a good spot. How do we open our minds to think about what are the other sectors for which we could apply these methods and how might we do that? So thank you for that. As we shift gears a little bit, we talk a lot about how we use these tools for evaluation, right? We talk about how they help us overcome some of the limitations in typical evaluation approaches, but there's also kind of this idea about monitoring. So how these methods might be applied to how we monitor how interventions are rolling out. So I want to move forward and think about it from this angle. And Iriana, to turn the table to you, help us think about how geospatial methods help us overcome some of the limitations of traditional monitoring and evaluation approaches. What have you seen to date?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the question. I think, when we talk about traditional monitoring, it's required it's very expensive, time consuming, limited about, we see a limitation of the coverage. So for the case of Madagascar, it's especially true because we have a difficult road, the access to collect the data. Sorry, is really difficult because we can go there more than once. So for Firma One research. So I use geospatial and household survey data to understand better how conservation policies can affect local communities. So with the satellite imagery and the GIS data, I can use, for example, or not for example, I use slope, elevation, population density to capture the environmental and socioeconomic impacts. And the geospatial methods help us to provide large-scale and continuousness information and to enable us to work to work on the tracked changes across Madagascar and access both the environmental impacts and the potential effects on people livelihoods. And most of the study focusing on this on my study. So the impact of protected areas on household living conditions. Most of the study in Madagascar focused in specific areas. But for me, I have an opportunity with my financement to download some geospatial data so I can analyze 71 protected areas in Madagascar. I think the geospatial methods, it's a way to have our data, because in Madagascar the most of students use collect data, so they use qualitative methods, not quantitative methods.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that example in Madagascar in particular, and how these tools help with setting up a good foundation for monitoring and then being able to do an evaluation alongside that. So thank you for that. And then turning to Arinze, how have you seen geospatial tools help overcome limitations?
Well, doing randomized evaluation, one of the things you realize is not only is it expensive, but when you're going to do the follow-up survey, you're not even sure what you're going to see, right? And you're always kind of handling attrition rates. Okay, are you still going to see the same household when you get there? What is the next thing that is going to prop up in your data? Now, using geospatial data, you could actually explore the possibility of reducing your attrition rates. One of the ways you could do that is to see what's the rate of migration within the area and what is causing that rate of migration. So I'll give you an example. Prior to 2009, the rate of migration in the northwestern part or northeastern part of Nigeria was quite small. But with Boko Haram attacks from 2009, you realize it just spiked. So what that meant is if we started an intervention in that area prior to 2009, by now we'll be in serious trouble. Okay. So one of the things that, at least in my experience, we have seen is using geospatial data, you're actually able to observe, okay, what exactly is happening in this area? Like using night lights, you know that, okay, fine, I can see a lot of households here. So most likely there might be little attrition depending on what I want to do. But if I see that there's not much activity going on here, then that means it's a clear indication. Maybe I should look for another alternative source. Now, the other thing also that helps a lot is if there is likely going to be an investment, like the government wants to do like a major investment in an area, it also gives you the opportunity to advise the government to say, okay, sorry, this area you want to invest in, there's nothing happening there. Maybe you should look somewhere else. And being able to do that without actually incurring a lot of cost in terms of going to the field, trying to monitor what is going on, is a way of, you could say, a use case that the government likes a lot. At least the Nigerian government, they always want to prove, if you could prove to them that they don't need to spend money and you can give them the data, they are willing to go with you. So I think using a lot of remote sensing for this kind of things, advising government, and of course, the other thing also, as mentioned in the last session, about verifying, okay, what is on ground. Because one thing is to say that, okay, in this area, there's a lot of vegetation, right? The productivity is high. And I think actually to go there to observe what exactly is going on, unless you can actually give a wrong advice and that could come back to you. So especially in terms of policy work, you could use a lot of that, even prior to monitoring and evaluation. So I think that's an area to go.
Thank you for that. And maybe just to push back on it for both of you to help us think and consider, you're both highlighting how there's potential for geospatial data to help us overcome some of these challenges. But what are some of the things that we should keep in mind as we're incorporating this type of data that maybe might give us some blind spots, right? I don't think there's any data out there that we can claim to be a panacea of information that will help resolve all of the issues, but what should we be aware of as we try to incorporate this type of data?
Okay, if I can go with that. So I think we should always try to verify the geospatial data at the global level with the local data already collected by some of these, you could say, satellite agencies within the country. An instance of that is recently, of course, in Nigeria, there's this kind of problem with the farmer-herder conflict. And that has become so volatile because based on certain data, it shows that the pathway for the herders is in one direction, but on the local data, it shows it's in the other direction. So that kind of gives you a sense of always trying to match what is happening at the global level with what is happening at the local level. So it's not always the case, especially in Africa, that the global data set or the remote sensing data matches accurately what's on ground. And then the change is continuous. There are a lot of things happening. So maybe you have the data from 2020, but now it has changed, right? So trying to analyze what is happening at the local level with that data might give you a different, like a biased view of actually what is going on. So I think verification is key. And then as one of the presenters mentioned yesterday, that merging the data is, you're not just looking at geography, you're also looking at causality, right? So once you merge, you might merge wrongly, especially in scenarios whereby the different municipalities or districts have changed or they have been rearranged. A typical example in my case has been with South Africa, right? So several years, one boundary has changed to another. They have called it a different name. So it's always very confusing to kind of find where was this boundary in 1993? Where is it now? No, they changed it in 2011. You say, sorry, why did they change it? So even with the provinces, they just keeps on changing. And by the time you merge it, you can just make the wrong thing. And then you're actually doing a different analysis compared to before. So that could be confusing. So it's always good to kind of look at what is happening at the local level. Why did they change it? What is the current thing? And how can you map it to the global level and then actually get a close enough analysis than before?
Yeah, thank you for that. So this idea of data that's fit for purpose as well as verifying, it can actually help address the questions we have and understanding what historical changes may have happened. I think that's a good thing to keep in mind. Did you have a point as well?
For my case, about the socioeconomic survey data in Madagascar, we just have a data for 1 year. So for my study, I can see the trends of the evolution of the protected areas. But when I integrate the geospatial data, I can see the evolution. So I have a long period. I think it's the importance to have a geospatial data. You know the evolution. You have a large scale, so you have many information. You can analyze something.
Just one clear highlight what he said, that the validation, even though remote sensing helps you to synoptically look at the landscape and probably look at patterns, and it's very important that we try and also integrate the in situ data. There is no way that we can just rely on remote sensing as the panacea for, even though it makes life a little bit easier, it's important the quality, because we want to provide evidence for decision making, and so the information that we give the decision makers should be very accurate, so that the decisions can be based on this that we.
So just add one more thing, and I think it is something also that was highlighted yesterday. Sometimes this data, whether remote sensing or the local data, it could be highly political. And it's always good that as researchers, we have that political sense or sensitivity to know that if you're trying to advise the government, you're trying to advise a particular institution, you should have to know what is the local context, right? What is the local context? Why is this important? Who is likely to be affected? An instance is Kenya, right? So, I mean, a study showed that the previous presidents, they have just constructed roads in their hometowns. So all the developments you see just in their hometowns. And of course, looking at it from the satellite view, you see this. That's not something you bring to the president to convince him that you did the wrong thing, right? So it's like, you don't do that. So you have to actually be a bit political to know if I'm trying to give an advice, I should also understand what exactly is going on. So you don't get it thrown back in your face that, sorry, you don't know what you're doing. So we should also be careful there that the local context matters, especially when it's close to elections. You don't go to advise government when you just allow the elections to pass, then you can come in and do what you want to do.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you for highlighting these different facets of what we should be aware of as we try to incorporate geospatial data, whether that's ensuring we're verifying what we have, ensuring that we're politically savvy and understand its way that we can use it. And so as we think about how these methods have been rolled out and they're being utilized, we've seen that institutions and governments have started utilizing them more. We see a lot more pilot scale projects that are ongoing that utilize these tools. How can we move from using pilot scale type projects into a more systematic adoption of these tools? So Peter, turn to you for your thoughts on that question.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would rather rephrase the questions to how do we move from pilot to real scale? Well, what we've learned about Africa is that it's not the lack of pilot, but what is lacking is institutionalization. And again, another experience is that scaling is less about technology and more about systems and incentives. However, but for us to move from pilot to rescale, I think the first thing is to incorporate the geospatial data, or geospatial data should be embedded in routine government processes. If it remains just a mere donor-funded add-on, then of course it is not really going to last. For example, if agricultural extension system requires geotag plots as part of their standard verification reporting, then that is obviously part of it, that form part of a system. So that's number one. Then number two, we need to focus more on simple standardized protocol. For example, I would take experience from the work that we did, because we actually collected geospatial data. What made us to break through was to give clear instruction to our enumerators, consistent photo capture protocol that we directed them, and basic GPS-enabled devices that we use. So you don't need highly specialized equipment to generate useful data. What you need is consistency. Now, the other thing which I will highlight still with respect to this is that we need to actually incorporate GIS into geospatial capabilities, such as monitoring and evaluation units, planning departments, and sector ministries. So the key takeaway here is that scaling happens when geospatial data becomes a requirement and not an experiment. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Peter. And maybe I'll just push on that just a little bit. So I like that you've highlighted that sometimes donors come with requirements to include this type of data, but really we need to move beyond that and trying to get governments to include this on their own and finding champions within different institutions that might use this data.
Yes.
I'm curious, what does that look like? Have you seen success in trying to help convince government agencies of the importance of this data and then seen that follow through?
Yeah, like the experience we have in Nigeria, we have a body that collects and publishes the national data, that is the National Bureau of Statistics. Now, at various points in time, we have raised concerns to say, well, the National Bureau of Statistics head office is at the capital city, but this data happens in the data needed happen in remote areas cut across the country. So we said there's the need for local government Bureau of Statistics, state government Bureau of Statistics, because these are the micro level unit that collect this data, aggregate them, and then the national level will now aggregate and then do the publishing. And to some extent, they listen to what we were saying. And then I think they are considering it seriously to actually establish local government Bureau of Statistics. We have state government, though not very active. We are saying they are not doing their job the way they're supposed to be doing, because we expect a synergy between the state and the local community, then they will now forward it to the national body to now aggregate and then publish.
So it seems that one way that you've seen this work is by finding a particular question that is of interest to a government agency, and that helps open the door and a pathway to maybe provide information about how these tools and methods might be useful in this context, leading to uptake.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
So just to add to what is said, I think when it could kind of move from a foreign donor to a domestic donor, especially when you're looking at the government, the local government, there's always this question of data quality, right? Are you sure that they're collecting the exact data that you need? Are you sure this household exists, or somebody just came up with some numbers and you don't know what exactly you're analyzing? So I think, at least my experience has been that sometimes the government, they need help, right? They do not have the expertise, or they are overwhelmed with the amount of work they're doing. So what, from my experience, always helps is if you have a local implementation partner that is specialized in this area, that partners with the government to provide this data, of course, at a reduced fee compared to what you're going to find if you go outside the country. That helps a lot. And with that, you are also sure about data quality. You're also sure that there's going to be continuity, because this person, they're following international standards. If we rely on the National Bureau of Statistics in Nigeria, I think they do a good job, but there are certain data that I will not actually have confidence in. All right. So it's always good to kind of help, because they always need that help. And if you have local partners that can raise funds by themselves and help the government that way, it goes a long way to actually make this data available that can be used for research and policy making.
So just to add to what he has just said, yeah, we had experience in the project we were doing in the northern part, and we had an international partner that wanted to see how they can join us scale of what we were doing, and they were proposing the use of drones. But that raised national security concern because they were wondering, is it just ordinary data you are going to collect, or you have something hidden behind it? So it could not really go well, because we didn't get the clearance from the National Security Office to be able to go that way. But that would have helped us. But just like he said, it needs this geospatial, yes, which is to validate probably what the traditional method of survey has been doing. It need not just to depend on the donor, because I said if we depend on the donor funded, obviously it's not going to last. So that is why we are saying that it now needs to be included in routine government procedures, so that at the end of the year, if they're even doing budgeting, they should have enough budgeting, meaning that this budget is earmarked for collecting data, not just to depend, or they can work in synergy with the donor, so that even the expertise the local will actually lend, so that they can continue even if they are pulling out. So these are some of the things.
Thank you both for your comments. I think that helps us understand kind of where we need to go in order to ensure that these methods and these data really are not just kind of a flash in the pan, right? We want them to be honed in on and taken up with vigor within these agencies. So thank you for highlighting that. As we move on, we think about, as these methods are being applied, broader implementation of them remains kind of uneven. There are a lot of barriers to the uptake of this. We've talked about this in the context of government, but there are a lot of other contexts in which we could think about the limitations and the barriers for uptake. Some of those challenges, could be around data access or interoperability or capacity. Foster, I turn to you for your thoughts and what you see as some of the barriers.
Yes, right now, I don't see data access as a big deal, because from where I'm coming from, the remote sensing data is all over the place. What is a big deal is the institutional capacity building. And I think that there has to be, I wouldn't have known anything about difference in differences if I had not been part of this. And how was I going to, make that knowledge available to? And so once I get to know this, I can, within my space or my area of operation, I can tell them about, look, geospatial experts don't have to just tell decision makers where things are, but we also have to tell them why these things are happening or what is causing, So for instance, when we map deforestation, we just lump everything and say, this is the deforestation rate, even though we know that the drivers of deforestation are mining, there's logging, there's agriculture, So of that, what component of that driver is, can we say, is coming from mining? So I think it's important that we build that capacity as we do this, and it's also important that we work together, even though we have been working in silos before this. How can we bring the economists, the impact evaluation practitioners, and the geospatial practitioners, and also decision makers in other sectors, how can we bring them together and build their capacity to understand why we are doing this? I also think the other thing is that in our decision-making processes, we do not see the integration of geospatial information as a core or as a main. It should be an integral part of the decision-making process. But we see it as, okay, just give me some maps and let me, analyze. That is an afterthought. So I think that it's important that we also think about how we can integrate it right from the word go, how we can integrate geospatial into our decision-making processes.
Thank you for that. Iriana?
I think Madagascar have the same case for financial challenges, human challenges, and institutional challenges. For example, for my study, to accessing and validating data, it's required administrative procedures extremely long. We need institutional negotiation. We need multiple data sources. So for my study, we download the data on protected areas from World Database on Protected Areas (WGPA). But when I watch the data, we see that some protected areas, it's don't have an information about boundaries. So we need to triangulate the data from the official Malagasy body overseeing protected areas, official decrees, and documents from the protected areas manager. So for having these documents, we need to it's not publicly available, so we need to request access from the environment ministries, and it makes so long. But I have the time to wait the government, so I think it's why my team say that we can use secondary data, and we verify with the geospatial data.
So it sounds like a couple of different things at play here, right? You talked a little bit about data availability. Sometimes the data is there, but it might be stored in other places and it has to be gathered. So trying to make sure that the data that is required for these types of studies has already been transformed in some way that is easy for researchers to then use, or evaluators is part of it.
Yeah, but it's not just for the barrier is not just for having the data. It's like for the infrastructure, because we have frequent power outrage, and the mobile data is really expensive. I think it's highly of average household income. So it's really a barrier for researcher, for everyone. And in addition, internet access remains unreliable, and it's mainly concentrated in major cities. So while connectivity in rural is very weak or practically non-existent. So it's a real it's hard to do a research in Madagascar if you don't have a financement.
Yes, and thank you for highlighting that, because I think those are indeed challenges that we face. And Foster, I wanted to push a little bit on one of the pieces that you brought up as well. You know, you mentioned that convenings like this is where sometimes information is shared. What does it look like in an ideal world to be able to engage in some of that capacity building and skills training? What have you found to be successful, or what would you like to see so that these tools and these methods don't just stay in one place, but really become part and parcel for anyone who wants to use them?
Yeah, so I see this as, for me, it's kind of like training the trainer, you know, and so having learned this, how can I also impact to my colleagues who are also geospatial experts? Do you only look at the spatial distribution of these phenomenon or these features? Are you looking at the causality, what is causing, for instance, deforestation in a particular forest area, even though we know that, like this example I keep giving because I've become so much interested in how we employ these tools to tease out the different parts, you know, of the global problem. So I have to become like an evangelist, you know, and so the idea is to impact, to get the information, and then as a geospatial practitioner to impact my fellow. That would be a cost-effective way, you know, of doing that. Another way is to bring people together once a while. You know, you can bring all an interdisciplinary, because we get to learn a lot from these kinds of convenings. You know, I learned a great deal from these convenings. You know, so that's another way. Yeah, I think that those are the two.
Thank you so much. I appreciate those thoughts. You know, as we think about how we can make sure to democratize these methods, right? We want them to be useful to a wide variety of scholars and evaluation specialists and the like. So changing gears a little bit, I want to think about some emerging technologies. We touched a little bit about drones earlier and some of the complications with national security, but you know, how might AI or drones or foundation models or near real-time Earth observation reshape development evaluation over the next few years? How do you see these technologies coming into play? Would you like to start?
Yeah, so I'll say that, at least personally, I've been impacted with the emergence of AI, especially trying to understand what's happening in geospatial world. Initially, when I was working on the project, of course, you see papers that talk about pollution, and they say they use the satellite data. And in economics, at least before we started the reproducibility policy about giving your data to the journal so that other people could see it, sometimes you look at the data, you just ask it, how did this person arrive at this? I mean, which data is this? How can I even access it? Now, but with AI, that has changed a bit, because you could actually put the information on AI and say, please explain this to me. What's happening here? And that's okay, how can you do this in Africa? And it shows you, okay, you can look at this. Of course, you ask an expert, is this correct? Just in case the AI is just messing up a bit. And that helps you to learn, right? You see things in different perspectives. You get to realize that, hey, there's this world, this amount of data outside that you could actually use to do a lot of impact evaluation that you didn't have access before. So AI has actually helped, and I think it will continue helping in the future, because it allows us to learn things that before it would have taken a lot of investment to learn, right? So you could actually, most of the things I learned on geospatial, you could say literature was through AI. I mean, just kind of playing around with things, looking at how things match, and then trying to see, well, is this correct? Speaking with someone else. So I think there's a lot to learn from this, right? And there's a lot that can be done even with AI.
I think it's interesting you mentioned the ability for AI to be a way to learn geospatial methodologies. I like that you also talked about the need to ensure that the AI is correct. I think there's still a lot of we're doing around the learning of the limitations of AI, but thank you for bringing that point up. Foster?
Yes. Yeah, I think we are in it's a new paradigm, it's a shift, and AI is going to transform, I believe, this space and any other thing that we are looking at. Things that we had to take like a year and a half to do. AI can do that in a split of a second. So you can have insights, and decision makers they just don't want, and I've learned that, giving a decision maker a map doesn't help him in any way. He wants insights. He wants, before he makes, and AI can, within a split of a second, with can give you that kind of, insights that can help you make it. So decisions that you would have to wait for probably like a week or two, so that you can get all the information from the various sectors. You can get that at the split of a second. The other thing is like the near real time, like the monitoring that we do, especially when we are looking at restoration sites. The restoration sites, because of the costs and things like that, we have to go there once probably in a while, and this helps us to, in terms of near real-time monitoring, case of with the remote sensing and satellite imagery that, has, come to you repeatedly at very fine temporal resolution. You are able to near real-time kind of look at what is happening, I was also thinking about the drone, but given the experience in Nigeria, I'm a little bit hesitant. but these are very, very positive, especially if you want to look at the local scale, and you want to validate at a very local scale, because it gives you very fine, a very high resolution imagery just for that local scale, and so these tools, this AI, near real-time monitoring, and the drones, and of course, the cloud computing platforms that we have available now is making life just so easy for some of us. So, yeah, this is.
And what I'm hearing a lot of is these data and tools, while they are useful in providing us this near-time information, what they're most useful is with policymakers and decision makers who need to be able to react quickly, right? I think in academia and research institutions, right, research takes a long time, right? It's not uncommon to have multi-year studies, and by the time the results come out, they might not be as relevant as they would have been, a couple years before, right? And so what I'm hearing is that this data and these tools could really be useful in terms of decision making, right? How can we provide decision makers with the information that they need so that they can react quickly?
Yes, I forgot one thing about these foundation models. These foundation models are good. They help. They help you look at patterns all over the place, but sometimes they can be too global to be true. And I think Arinze underscored that. And so there is data at the local scale that helps you to retrain those foundation models, and so even though the foundation models have some limitation, there is data available at the local scale so that you can retrain. So that quickens the pace, of, yeah, so, yeah.
Just to add, thank you very much. So sometimes policymakers do not have the patience to wait. I mean, doing like an RCT and you say, sorry, we need to wait 1 year to see what is the impact. Say, sorry, I need to do this because if I don't do this, I might lose the election, right? So sometimes this is also something we need to bear in mind, that policymakers do not have the patience, especially if there's an election coming up. They want brick and mortar. They want to know, if I build this, would it have an impact? And the only way you can do that also is through satellite. You can actually see what is happening. Like an instance is within the health sector. The Lagos state government kind of approached me and said, say, we need to know what is the impact of the primary healthcare centers that were built across Lagos. How many people are accessing this? Now, I might tell them, okay, hold on a second. We need to do a survey. We need to do like a randomized evaluation to see. But they want what is going on. They want to know what is going on, right? So sometimes even the tools that are available for us can also help us to answer those questions faster rather than waiting for a long time to actually give them feedback.
Yes, I think there's a sense of urgency in trying to provide as much information as possible for decision-making purposes. So I think that's been well highlighted. And I want to take a 30,000-foot view here. So we've talked a lot about different ways that it can be applied, what some of the challenges are, how we might get around some of them. But I want to think about what kind of partnerships are needed, whether this is across government, academia, multilateral organizations, and research institutions, to build a stronger geospatial evaluation ecosystem in Africa in particular. What does that look like? What's needed? And Peter, I'll turn to you first.
Yeah, I will start with this remark that the partnership that matter are not necessarily the biggest, but the most functional ones. And so, yes, different layers of partnership. We have the government and implementers. We have academia and implementations. We have the private sector. We have multilateral and foundations. These are the different layers of partnership. So first, if we look between government and implementers, we said this partnership is very critical because the field team, which consists of NGOs and enumerators, they need incentives, they need training, they need to be encouraged because they are the ones that are collecting the data that we need. So if they compromise or undermine the activity, obviously, probably what they may get might not reflect the true state of things. It can be misleading. Now, the second layer is between the academia and the implementations. Yes, universities and other academic institutions are doing a lot of work when it comes to the methodology. But the challenge is that these methodologies are not actually translated into field work to actually generate the data. So there's the need to actually bring that connection between this knowledge that is hashed by the universities to actually practitioners that are in the field, to be able to use it to get the kind of information that we need. Then the private sector too, they equally have a role to play in terms of scaling and propagating what has been done. And then the work of multilaterals and foundations, like those that have organized this discussion, they have a critical role to play in setting the standards, supporting open data, and finding long-term capacity and not just short-term pilots. So that is actually the role that they need to play. So ultimately, what we need is an ecosystem where data flows across actors and not locked in within individual projects. So I think that is what is expected.
Thank you for highlighting all those different dimensions, right? As we think about the methods that are created in research institutions, how that flows down to practice, and especially in fieldwork as the data is being collected and the support given by multilateral institutions. So along that entire partnership, bandwidth, we need support throughout all of it. Iriana, can I turn it to you as well?
Okay, for this question, I think You know, for instance, in my laboratory in Madagascar, we work with a multidisciplinary research laboratory in Senegal, in Côte d'Ivoire, and in France. And this collaboration established by IRD with the University of Versailles in France. And this collaboration provides unique access to field site and to collect original data to exchange with other PhD in other countries. Along the same lines, through the collaboration, the partnership of the University of Madagascar, the University of in France, and the KfW and IFG, and my team, my project team, every year, many students in Madagascar have a chance to attend a week-long training session. And the session is on impact evaluation, focusing on impact measurement using spatial data. And for the 5-day program, we'll cover various methodologies and tools for using spatial data to measure project impact with practical examples. So I think the collaboration, the partnership is a way to teach, to share the our data, because in the soft we don't know what is the geospatial data, how to use that. So I think the partnership is very important.
Thank you for highlighting the role that universities can play in sharing knowledge, you know, university to university and student to student, and to be able to transmit some of this information so that it kind of continues on. So thank you for that.
Exactly.
Now I want to think big picture. We've talked a lot about kind of challenges, opportunities, where we want to see things going. I want to hear from each of you, what excites you the most about the future of geospatial impact evaluations in the region? So maybe we can start with Peter and then kind of go around the table.
A number of things excite me about the future of this geospatial impact evaluation, especially in Africa. And one of the very first things is, for the first time, we have the convergence of three things. That is, those three things are very low-cost data captured through smartphones, increasing frequent and accessible satellite imagery, and AI tools that can process large volume of spatial data. So what this then means is that we now have opportunity to verify development outcomes in a manner that was not possible before. So that's one of the excitements. Now, the second excitement is about some of the related research questions that we used to ask, which I think the introduction of geospatial tools has actually changed the pattern in which we can ask the question. For instance, we can now move away from asking, did the farmer receive input, to asking, does the farm actually exist? Where is it? And what is happening on it? So again, another excitement is about instead of the periodic evaluations we used to conduct, we can now move close to continuous real-time, verification or learning. And then in addition, the long-standing question we have been having, now we have opportunity of verifying the questions of credibility of our data, because most often the data that, or some of the conclusion that we researchers have always arrived at, you will find it very difficult to verify the data source. But with the introductions of the geospatial tools, you can actually, verify the credibility of this data so as to know whether the conclusion arrived at is right or wrong. But I'm going to end with this word of caution, that the retransformation will not come from technology alone. It will come from whether African institutions take ownership of these systems and integrate them into how they take decisions. Because at the end of the day, it is not about having more data, but it is about having data that is trusted, verifiable, and used. Thank you.
I think after this, I was just wondering, what am I going to say after this one, right? So for me, I think looking at the big picture, what's important is long-term effects of data, of decision making, right? So long-term effects of impact evaluation, so interventions have been done. I think geospatial data helps us to actually study those long-term effects so that we do not do something that's, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years down the line, we're wondering who the hell took this decision, what were they thinking? So I think with that kind of data, you could actually verify, and this is something that in economics we're doing a lot, especially when you're talking about political history, right? What happened during the colonial times? What has it been affected? What's the impact today? And you see a lot of people using actually satellite data with maps, colonial maps, showing things to verify what was going on, concession companies and the rest. And these are interesting topics because it actually gives you a sense of why are there regional disparities in things regarding health or access to jobs or in things regarding even support for the government or conflict even. So satellite data can help, remote sensing data can help, especially when you have satellite data that goes back, I don't know, 19th century. So long-term effects of decision making, I think for me is like the key. You could actually verify what is going on after a long time.
Yes, and for me, the exciting thing is how quickly we can come up with evidence for decision making, and how we can, like I keep saying, we can tease out the parts of that global problem and provide evidence based on the subsets. I keep on giving the deforestation example. You know, I can imagine how probably back home the Minister for Natural Resources would look at my information again if I gave him a global, map, and I also gave him a map that pinpoints what the drivers, the contribution of the various drivers. I think that will help him target much better, his interventions. So I think it's a great opportunity that I see out there. And what else? Yeah.
Another development that could prove particularly important is the growing role of participatory and community-based geospatial systems. In my own experience, I see that in a rural context, local communities possess a strong environmental knowledge, like the secret prohibition, for example. So when I take an example for the east coast of Madagascar, some forests or river may be prohibited to exploit which in a certain moment in a certain place. So I think it's practice if we introduce the knowledge of these communities in the systems, in the geospatial systems, because when we do surveys, the population participate with us to do mapping tools, to participate to do mapping, to do map, and I think this gap can help by allowing communities. I think it's contribute directly to environmental and socioeconomic, and we can know what is the what is the the need of the communities, not just to make some tools for the population.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your thoughts. And thank you for being on this panel, helping us walk through kind of where we see geospatial methods and data moving forward in the African continent. And so I'd like to give a round of applause to our panelists. And thank you for joining this session. We'll now go for a break and reconvene at 3:15 for our final session.